So are you a cheapskate when it comes to tipping, or do you pride yourself on being generous? If you live in the United States, tipping is something you just can't avoid. But what is appropriate when it comes to tipping? Should all tipping be between 15 and 20%? What if you live in a big city versus a small town? Should you tip at an open bar? How about a salon? Do you tip the shampoo person the same amount you tip the hairdresser? Well, the list goes on and on. So to give us some helpful tips on what to tip and how to tip, we're joined by Lindsay Pollock. She's a speaker and consultant specializing in generation-wide career and workplace issues, as well as being a best-selling author of Getting from College to Career, 90 Things to Do Before You Join the Real World. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thanks for having me.
So, Lindsay, there's really no rule of thumb on how much you should tip, but we always hear 15 to 20%, but you say there's a variety of factors that actually go into tipping. Can you go through those for us?
Sure. 15 to 20% is a great rule of thumb to keep in mind, but you also want to think about other factors. So, first of all, where are you in the country or in the world? Bigger cities, you tend to tip a little bit more. Sometimes when you're in a touristy place, you want to be careful because they may be adding the tip to your bill and you don't want to double tip. Secondly, you want to think about how good the service is. A tip really is giving somebody extra for good service. So if you've gotten really excellent care, you want to tip a little more for that or a little less if it wasn't so good. And finally, I think you really have to think about how you are to be served. So if you're kind of a high maintenance kind of person, you might want to tip a little extra for what it takes to take care of you.
Okay, thanks for clearing that up. Now, before we get started on how much exactly to tip, can you tell us how you became such a guru on tipping?
Yeah, it was actually from my personal experience. I travel all around the country talking to college students, and I often got questions about how much to tip in a networking lunch or in business travel, and I wanted to know myself, so I went and did the research in etiquette books and on the internet and tried to find the best answers.
All right, so we're happy to have you here right now and go through some of these for us. And the obvious one is, let's start off with restaurant servers. How much should you tip here?
15 to 20% is the standard across the board, and I looked at Zagat.com and they found that the national average is 18%. So if you're in that range, you're going to be good.
All right, so when people then buy drinks, say, at bars, no matter how much the drink is, some people tend to just give $1. Is that a good rule of thumb?
$1 is a good rule of thumb. $2 if you got excellent service or if you're at a really fancy bar or if you want to impress your date, but $1 to $2 is pretty standard.
What about if you just get a glass of water?
My feeling is if somebody is serving you and they're polite, they do deserve a tip even if you're not drinking anything alcoholic or that costs them money.
All right, the next one that we have here on the list is food delivery.
Food delivery, 15% is a good rule of thumb. If you get $20 in pizza and soft drinks, you want to give about $3 in a tip. Again, more if it's pouring rain or if the person had to climb 5 flights of stairs to get to your apartment.
Right. You have to factor in the distance here.
Exactly.
Okay. How about when you go to the salon? Now, this is a big one. Do you tip the hairdresser, the shampoo person, the valet person, the person who does your highlights? I mean, you could walk out of there broke, literally.
Yeah, I have a lot of hair, so I tend to over-tip at hair salons. So 15 to 20% for your hairdresser who's doing the bulk of the work, $2 to $5 for the person who's washing your hair. And I think it's important to hand them the tip personally, keep that relationship, and really say thank you for making me look good.
Yeah, it really is important because you want to go back the next time and get equal service if you're happy with it.
Exactly, and people remember you if you tip well.
What about when you get a massage?
Massage, about 10 to 20%, again, depending on where you are, how good the service was, and how fancy the salon is where you're having the massage. You might want to tip a little bit more if the environment is really lovely and you feel like you had a very special experience.
All right, that sounds fair. Now, this one is for those who live in big cities. How much do you tip a taxi driver?
Taxi drivers are interesting. In New York, you've now got little things that help you figure it out mathematically. Yeah. So I think 15 to 20% is pretty standard. In taxi service, you really want to think about how polite they were and whether they got you exactly where you asked to go.
Right. That's something that I wanted to discuss a little bit more with you. What if they don't drop you off at the spot that you requested? Sometimes they can't.
If it's out of their control and they've tried to do the right thing and be polite, I would give 15 to 20%. If they've been rude or if they haven't taken you the way you want, I generally say politely, you know, I really wasn't happy with the service. I'm going to give you a tip, but I wanted to let you know why I'm tipping a little bit less.
Okay. How about sky caps at airports?
Sky caps at airports, about $1 per bag if they're just carrying it to the curb. If they're carrying it right to the counter for you, about $2 per bag. I'm a little bit of a nervous flyer, so I give a little bit more because I feel like it's is good karma.
And then when you get to that hotel, how about hotel housekeepers? How much do you tip them and how often?
You know, I travel a lot, so with hotel housekeepers, I learned that you want to tip every evening because you may get a different housekeeper each day and you want to make sure it's fair. So about $2 to $5 a night, and be sure to put it there every day.
Okay, let's talk about now who not to tip, and we'll start with the good old cable guys.
The cable guy, you don't need to tip. It's part of his job. I think a glass of lemonade or a cup of coffee or water is always polite to give, but anyone where it's included in the cost of the service, you don't need to tip, and many of them won't accept it.
Okay. What do you do then at an open bar? There are always those tip jars on the counter, and you feel obliged that you have to give something.
Yeah, I think they stick their own money in there to make you feel like you have to. If you're going to an open bar event, it is the responsibility of whoever is hosting that event to cover the gratuity of the people at the bar. So if you really want to, you certainly can, but it's not required.
Now, do you have any good tips on how to calculate, say, for example, 20%? Because oftentimes you're out and, you're on the fly and you can't even come up with a figure.
I think we all forget how to do math when we're in those kind of situations where you have to figure it out really quickly. I love the little calculator on my cell phone. They have little laminated cards where you can know what to tip. If it makes you feel more comfortable and like you're more likely to do the right thing, then use your tip calculator. Use those little cards so that you feel more comfortable and you do the right thing.
Right. There is also that one where you move the decimal point for 20% of the total and you double it, and that's 20%, right?
I still get nervous, but yeah, that's a good rule of thumb.
That's my way of doing it anyway.
That works.
So everybody gets 20% from me. Lindsay, is tipping an American thing?
Tipping is a big thing in America. There are other countries where tipping is protocol as well. So before you travel overseas, you want to double check what the requirements are in different countries so you don't over tip or under tip.
Yeah, it's not huge in Ireland, I can tell you that from my own experience.
I lived in Australia. It wasn't big there either, but I used to tip, so they loved me there.
All right, Lindsay. Thanks for joining us today. Some great information. We learned a lot today.
Thank you so much for having me.